your intentions? What are your goals in reading this? I am planning to, I guess, like in the front of your book, so we don't actually have to do a full journal, since y'all did not seem enthused about that idea.
No, I was fine with it.
Well, I feel like everybody's gonna be left out anyway. So, but just take a minute and I guess on the front cover of your book, make a list of the ailments that either you or your family member have dealt with, that you're aware of. So, like, just take a minute to write them down, because I'm gonna do that too, because I didn't do it ahead of time because I wanted to do it like in process. So, any kind of medical conditions on either side of your family that they have had to cope with.
Okay.
And if it's like a cancer, be specific. Are y'all done with your list?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to, I guess, kind of address what we all have on our list, because I think that taking a moment to reflect on what is already ailing us and ailing our family members, um, can just, like, I guess, help us read with direct intention. So in my family, we deal with diabetes, high blood pressure. We've had people with heart attacks, cervical cancer, cirrhosis of the liver. So I put non-genetic beside some of these because I have some that are non-genetic. Kidney disease, and then I have HIV and lung disease. And so I have the cirrhosis, the HIV, and lung disease as being non-genetics. Does anybody have anything different in their family?
No, that's pretty much. I mean, I put down the diabetes, heart issues, cardiac issues, high blood pressure, the kidney disease, but that's secondary to diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been like the major issues for my family.
Yeah, the only thing I had different was anemia. That's the only thing that was different. Everything else is pretty much the same as what you guys said.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, hey, good morning. How you doing?
Hey, I'm fine, thanks. How are y'all?
You sound asleep.
Oh, a couple little while ago.
Okay. We're just talking about, because we're talking about reading this book with intentions. And so starting off by talking about like the things that affect our families. So our lists are pretty much the same, which is one of the things that I wanted to highlight, because that is what I was expecting, is the fact that as African American women reviewing our list, we all have things dealing with blood pressure and diabetes and, heart issues, and just kind of how prevalent it is in our community. So I went and I Googled some statistics. Shonda, can you give me permission to share screen?
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second. Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right. So I went through and pulled up some stats just in general on like obesity in African American community, and it also pulled up, the white community as well for comparison factors. And for men, um, white men tend to be more typically obese, but for the women, that one stuck out to me. Like 80.6% of Black women are obese, where it's 64.8% of white women. Um, and I think that just places emphasis on the attention that's paid to it. As far as the obesity rates with a BMI of 30 or greater, um, non-Hispanic Black men is significant, well, just a little bit higher than white, whereas the women is 56% to basically 38%, so 1.5 times that rate. Um, and then dealing with heart disease, this one also kind of struck a chord because there are more diagnosed cases amongst the white community, but right underneath it in the secondary chart is the death rates. And there's a significantly higher death rate in the Black community. And I think that one of the things that we need to definitely talk about as we are reading this book is the stigma behind medical care and the stigma behind getting help as Black people in America. Like, we will roll out, we don't have annual appointments, we don't have our regular checkups, and just kind of how that is devastating to our community. For the diabetes rates, for non-Hispanic Black men, and this one stood out a lot as well, 13.4%, with white men, 8.7%, for the women, 12.7%, for the white women, 7.5%. And then, hold on, I'm trying to move us over here to the side. And then further down, those who are actually diagnosed with diabetes, you have the 12.4 to the 7.8, looking at the whole. And then one of the things that he actually says in the book is that inflammation is the cause of disease. And so sure enough, when I Googled what is inflammation and what are the effects on it, it actually identifies 5 categories, and that actually coincides with the chapters of his book. So the fact that it does deal with cancer, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and Alzheimer's. And I also paid attention to the fact that that also relates directly to our lists. With the exception of the anemia that Shonda mentioned, everything else that we've mentioned that is genetic is covered by this conclusive list. And so I think that it is important that, like I said, we attack this book or approach this book with intentions and acknowledging kind of where we are in this process. So, like, does anybody have commentary on any of the statistics or anything like that?
No, I totally agree about, the numbers probably not even being as accurate because of us being underdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all, for the simple reason, as you stated before, of not really wanting to uh, get checkups and go to the doctor's office. I was talking to you about my dad's issues before, and I literally had to force him to keep his appointment for his colonoscopy. And I'm like, so what is it? What do you want? Do you want to go ahead and do this, or do you want to end up with some type of cancer and not know about it? Like, it's very important at your age that you go and have this done, you know? And I think that that's a lot of our family members in us in the communities not wanting to go.
So not doing right, because that was my dad's situation. He went, he got the prescription, and come to find out, he would like take his medicine whenever he felt bad, and then he would take it consistently. And then whenever it ran out, by that point, there's enough in his system that he feels okay, and so he wouldn't go get it refilled till he felt bad again.
That's just, oh my goodness. We gotta do better. And my aunt, I just had to lecture her because she had an incident where she went to go and get her hair braided, and she ended up passing out. And they called the ambulance and everything, and they were checking her, and they didn't really find anything wrong. But she doesn't want to go to the doctor for a follow-up appointment. Like, it's not natural for you to be passing out for no reason. Like, go see what is going on with you.
Right.
So do
But
y'all think that that is a genuine fear of the medical, or is that just kind of an ignorance is bliss mentality?
I think
I
it's
was gonna-
fear.
I would say combination. I think a lot of people, like you said, you don't, a lot of people really do have fear. Like we do have patients. And like I said, since I do work in healthcare, as a social worker, we see a lot of people on dialysis from the African American community that are younger. So, a lot of the white patients that come in, they're in their 70s, so they've put this disease off a long time. But it's not uncommon to see us in our 30s and 40s come in and have to be on dialysis. But I see people that are genuinely afraid of doctors, where they have that whole white coat syndrome where, when they come into the office, their blood pressure goes sky high. But I also see that a lot of us, we literally run from the doctor until we wind up in the hospital, and it hits us in the face, and then we have to deal with it.
and I was gonna say, like, I have a friend who, like, he has this really bad hiccup, and it got worse to the fact that he couldn't breathe, and he woke up gasping for air. And I was like, just go to the doctor. He wouldn't tell me why he wouldn't go until later. And honestly, it's the case for a lot of people. One, doctors didn't take Black people seriously, and so like for him, when he was in, had to go to the on base doctor when he was in the Navy or something. It was some branch of the military or army. They kept dismissing his because he's a big Black man. Like he's a stereotypical like huge Black man. So like when he went there because something was wrong with his, I think it was his foot or something, they kept sending him home like, oh, there's nothing wrong, you're good. But it turns out it was a serious medical issue, and they did that to him repeatedly. And he came across racist doctors, and he was like, I'm not gonna keep going, because I kept saying, why don't you go to the doctor? And he was like, why would I go just for them to give me medication that I don't like or don't need? I can just try to solve it myself by changing my diet. And I'm like, obviously something's super wrong right now. You need to go. But I realize that's why a lot of people don't go, because they aren't taken seriously. Like the girl who died, when she was waiting over 6 hours in the ER, she was complaining of chest pain, and they sent her. She ended up going home, and she ended up they having to call the ambulance, and she died later. Um, a lot of times it's because we don't trust doctors. We don't feel like they're taking us seriously, and it's also, like y'all said, a fear of doctors. Because some people who have experienced deaths in their family at hospitals or doctors, they don't feel that way too. And it's just, we're going to have a higher statistic because, one, we still eat off of what we know, which is what we handed down from slavery. And two, we don't have access to a lot of healthy foods like other races do, or we don't even know about them, that they exist. And then three, you also have this fear compounded on top of that. So it just kind of, it's like a lot, like pushing against the Black community, but people don't see that. They just see it as, oh, well, y'all just don't want to change, or y'all just eat so unhealthy. Okay. Can we afford to eat healthier? Will you give us, something closer to us that we can teach us how to, eat nutritiously, like that kind of stuff. So I can see why the statistics are high for us and why people are afraid to go to the doctor.
Yeah, it also has a lot to do with the post-traumatic slave syndrome or post-traumatic slave disorder, where it's basically in our DNA to fear doctors because of all of the experimentation and things like that that happened to our ancestors. And you know, as you said, as Jessica was saying about them ignoring our levels of change, I read an article recently about a young lady that was getting ready to give birth, and she specifically requested that there be Black nurses in the room with her. And they were like, why are you making this request? Because she said, if I feel like something is wrong, they'll believe me. And I was like, wow, because you look at the statistics and we have, the higher rate of actually dying while giving birth. So all of that stuff is really real and really valid.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
I attended a CU training last Saturday that was all day. And one of the breakout sessions was by Dr. Stephen Niffy, and he's a Black psychologist. And he was talking about racial trauma. And during one portion of his speech, he was talking about how, we're, because of all the stress that we're under, when we look at genetics and what we pass on, that we naturally have, a lot of times we're born with higher levels of cortisol, which is that stress hormone. And so he says, like, we're literally coming in, with higher levels of cortisol. And so that fight or flight, and stress level is already high, even as babies. So that cortisol is all that stuff that affects, our hormone levels, our blood pressure, cardiac issues, you name it, it affects it. But it's like we're naturally born with higher levels coming into the game already because of the stress that our mothers and fathers are under when we're being born.
Did he give any suggestions on how to break that cycle? Because I would be interested in hearing that lecture.
He did, and I can post some of his information. What he's doing is actually he's offering free therapy to I don't know if it's just for Black men, but he does an assessment, and he's like offering like coping strategies for me. I think he says like a 12-week program, and you can actually undergo the training, through his institute, and then kind of, get it going in your own community. But I can post this information.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I'll post his name because I'm sure you can find him. He says on Instagram. But it was really, really great lecture. And just like you said, just thinking about, because how, we're always blaming. There's always so much blame on our community. We don't do this, we don't do that. But then when you look at it, we just come into the, on a different playing field anyway, when we come into the game. And he also gave a statistic on, I think it was African mothers, how, which each generation, like, when they first get here to America, the African babies are born at a certain, birth rate. And the longer the mothers are here, the smaller the babies get. So I was just kind of, just mind blowing. And he just even talked about, like, I think my friend was in another lecture where they talked about African women, how their level of just satisfaction with life goes down in America as the longer they're here as well. I think maybe even just 2 years, not even a long time, just their overall happiness level, satisfaction of life. And so when you look at all this, it's all this emotional torrentness going on inside us that also affects our health.
Well, I don't know like specific statistics on it, but I know a lot of my African friends whose parents brought them here for school basically when they were younger. So they moved here for the educational purposes. Like once their kids graduated, they went back home. And I remember thinking like, you're going to leave America to go back to, sometimes third world conditions or even second world conditions are worse than America. But it makes sense.
I was about to say, Jasmine, I've had plenty of, like you said, African friends, and they always say they come here to get the education, get what they need. But a lot of times their goal is to go back home because they talk about how happier they are, how well connected, and how just supporting they are in their communities, how much they gather. The support is just way different than here in America. And I think that's a big portion of it as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say they probably feel isolated here.
Yeah, but we're isolated. You think about it, a lot of times we don't speak to family. We talk to this one, we don't talk to that one. And, so when you think about it, when they come here and they see how we live, they're like, it's not so great.
That's true. I actually had to, with my students that I was teaching last night, explain to them, because they can't understand what we were talking about, was reducing your carbon footprint and the effects of climate change. And we had this whole little listening session about this lady that was trying to help reduce it, and she was living with 3 other roommates and blah blah blah. And we were making comparisons because I'm like, that is not necessarily something that we like to do here in the States. Is we don't like living with other people. I think we had this conversation before. So I can get that sense of community, not really gathering with our families as much as other cultures do, because that's really a foreign concept to a lot of them, especially in the Middle East, where they have gatherings with their family like almost every Saturday, going to worship at the mosque together pre-COVID, and even having those gatherings just in their homes now. And it's something that we really aren't really geared towards, and especially in comparison with taking care of the elderly in our community, where they bring their parents into their homes, their grandparents into their homes to watch after them and take care of them, which also in some ways, for the ones that have the ability, it takes the load off. Like if you have children, your parents or grandparents can help out with them. They can help out with the meal prep. They can help out with maintaining the chores and keeping the house clean. And here we're just like, oh, you're going to the nursing home because I can't really deal with it. So now. all of that is different. It really is. And especially in African countries, like that's just family is the thing. And I'll just say that because in my former life, I had a play husband that was from an African country, and we didn't work out because of the family dynamic. And I was perfectly fine being in another country while he was playing professional soccer in another country. And he thought that he would be okay with it. And then he decided that he wasn't. And, his family was like, what kind of thing is this? Your wife is in another country and what are you doing? Like, she's supposed to be at home with the family and the blah, blah, blah. And so we ended up not working out for that specific reason, because we had 2 different outlooks on things. I'm like, you're over there, I'm over here. That's what my ideal relationship or
not ideal, Shonda. Come on now.
Marriage looks like, because I like my space. I like being by myself. We see each other, every other month or whatever, and I'm good with that. But yeah, we just have a totally different outlook. We really do.
She said every other month.
Right. Shonda, do better.
Every other week.
I'm not lying. Like, I'm serious. That's why my relationship now works out so well, because he works and travels a lot. So we see each other like, maybe a couple times a month, but I'm good because I got my space. I need my peace.
No, I like peace, but I also I like that time together too. So
I was
Like
telling these
I
people,
want my piece to just be in separate rooms. I don't want to go, 2 months without seeing you.
y'all sitting here talking about all these other, because I started thinking about like all these other countries, literally, even in the world, like literally do have this sense of community and closeness and togetherness. And I was like, how come COVID didn't run more rampant through them than us? And I said, you know what? Because they had shared ideals and goals while we over here isolated doing whatever we want to do.
That is very true. Very, very true.
Right. That
Well,
sense of taking care of the community, and everyone's well-being, where we're so individualistic and so worried about our rights of being taken away. We're not worried about the next person and the community as a whole and making money.
but then adding to that stress factor, we definitely lack the sense of community. But in addition, I think that American culture, we basically glamorize 60-hour work weeks and not sleeping
Mhm.
and not taking vacations, and everybody brags about how much they work and how many hours they put in, and it's a competition to work yourself to death is what it turns into.
Right.
Well, really, it's also, greed, because it's the companies also just trying to get as much as they can out of you and give you as little as possible. And, a lot of that outsourcing and stuff they were trying to do because they're still trying to cut down costs and then still pay you as little as they can. So you're doing what you have to do to keep a job, but
And
Most
like you said, I
definitely.
think we glamorize having it all. That idea of having the nice big house, the nice cars, all of these things. And we like literally, like you said, work ourselves to death trying to pay for those things. And they're just things. But I think with America, there's so much of the keeping up with whatever, this American ideal is, like we talked about before, I don't think it's really worth it.
Well, it's crazy that you made that segue, because that's actually one of my questions that I want to talk about, because all of our other books have been about finances and community and trauma and overcoming barriers. But even after reading just an intro and a chapter of this book, I had those same questions about how that's all connected. Because in his introduction, one of the first things he says, actually the first thing he says, you catch a cold or the flu, but you develop heart disease, obesity, diabetes, dementia, hypertension, most cancers, and more health problems from the food choices you make. And I thought that phrasing it that way is in the development, and the fact that because this does happen over time, if we were more knowledgeable, or as Jessica was referring to, kind of the food deserts, like I told y'all, we shifted our diet about back in December-ish. And one of the hardest things to do was to find things without sodium, because even your basic seasonings in your regular everyday stores are filled with it. And I went to Fresh Market, which is a obscenely ridiculously expensive store, just to get pure seasonings and spices, because you can't find a lot of that in the regular stores. You can find some, but you can't find the full range that doesn't have salt and other forms of sodium added into it.
I didn't know you had seasonings without salt in it.
Exactly. See?
What you talking about?
So yeah, but I mean, and it's just been a learning experience on trying to figure out not only what seasonings are available, but how do you use them? Instead of going and buying something that is mostly salt.
But then that goes to show you, like you said, when you visit other countries and they literally have spice markets that are full of, fresh spices, and you go in and it's just like a bounty of all this fresh, things that you can use to have a lot of vegetarian dishes. And, so it's just a lifestyle thing. Like you said, and here everything's very processed and it's just different.
So how do you keep spices fresh? Because I know salt is used to preserve things, which is probably why they add salt to everything we have. So how do you keep a spice fresh without it expiring?
Airtight
If you
containers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, stuff
Growing in
will
your
go bad
house
if you don't use it,
or
but
in your yard.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have access to them.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yep. And then he also in the introduction talks about um, the issue of procrastination. He says, sadly, that human nature is driving full steam ahead off the cliff of ruined health, disease, death, financial loss, hurt, broken families, pain, and unfulfilled dreams. And so, I mean, he goes hard. Like, this is still on page 1 of the introduction
Mm.
of him basically tying all of those things together because truly they are one and the same. And then he talks about how we treat the symptoms instead of the problem.
Right.
Like we'll go in and yeah, we're going to give you, this Tylenol to alleviate that pain or to cut down on that swelling, but we're not going to talk to you about what you can actually do to remove it. Because I've been the one teaching my dad, like I said, with his diabetes, his doctors, giving him things like don't eat white bread, don't eat white rice, eat more vegetables. But whenever you're giving those generalizations and you're not specifying, eat more fresh vegetables or frozen vegetables because canned vegetables are just as bad for you as a cheeseburger, you know, as far as like the
That's
salt
true.
and the sodium levels are concerned. Um, they're just not given
But
the
you can,
information to address it.
And that's the other thing in comparison with other countries as well. I think I've spoken to y'all before about how they really don't do the GMOs and processed foods. Like in Saudi,
Mm-mm.
the GMOs are illegal. Um, so they're eating much more healthier. Everything is much more fresh in comparison to at home where they just got these fruits that are injected with Lord knows what, and mostly steroids, because I've seen some of the biggest strawberries and grapes I've ever seen in my life recently. And I'm like, is this even natural? Like, how did this even happen? And then the same thing with our meat. It's just it's insane the ways that they want to save money, the ways that they want to increase production by just basically poisoning us.
Monique, we were talking about you earlier because I was asking who is in healthcare. So we want all your feedback on this stuff because you see it firsthand and you're going to know more than we know. So be prepared for questions.
Hey everybody. Oh yeah, no, I'm cool with that.
Hey.
I mean, that's legit crazy. I don't think I want to read this book with y'all. Y'all making me feel some like,
Look,
I don't
I
even
can't.
know.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. If I gotta find it though. It's somewhere deep in the recesses of my email somewhere. But this, I look at a lot of different like Black movements, and one of them that I was reading up on was the Five Percenters. But they put out this thing about it was like this whole manual about how disgusting and nasty and filthy pigs are. And that made me stop eating pork because there's this whole thing about how they have these what do they call them, like these things on their legs that just sweat pus constantly.
Mm-mm.
And oh yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff about that. But I'm gonna find it and send it to y'all, and maybe you can distribute it to your family members. But it talks about what you were referring to earlier, Jessica, that slave diet, with the
Mm-hmm.
chitlins and the pig ears and the pig feet, and just basically all the scraps that they gave us that we had to make do with, but people still eat it like we're still on the plantation. So yeah, I'm gonna send that to y'all for y'all to look at as well.
And see, swine hasn't been my my crutch. I mean, for my family, it's kind of divided because we're 7-day Adventists, so we're supposed to be vegetarians. Even though right after church we would go into Captain D's, but it's, I mean, that was my childhood. Like right at the church, we just trying to get to the food. Except when my grandma was alive, she always make us eat the vegetarian stuff in church. But like I stopped eating pork over a decade ago, only because I was like, okay, I'm gonna cut out 1 meat a year so I can get down to vegetarian. At the pork, I that was it. That was it. So that's the one thing I've consistently never haven't eaten since. But it's crazy how much when I was cutting it out, even now, how much I realized pork is still in everything. It was in Oreos before that somehow took out the gelatin. Like marshmallows, I can't eat. It's a lot of stuff I can't eat because of pork. But yeah, like that the part that worries me is like not so much that part, even though I wish my mom would stop eating pork. But no, it's just it's all that too. And then it's like the doctor thing. Y'all was talking about how somebody doctor gave, I think your dad Tylenol or something, or they give us like Tylenol just to help with pain or something. And I've never really been a pill person until I had to take medication last year for my PE. And then I was just like, so I've been going back recently, and because I was having chest pain, I was like, oh well, just take this. It's like a huge pill, like 800 milligrams ibuprofen, and the other half is 26 point something milligrams or something. And I'm just like, I don't need this. I just need you to figure out what's happening. Like, I appreciate it, but basically all you're doing is just doing something to ease the pain. It's not finding the cause of it. So I appointed an appointment with a specialist, but it's just like, he kind of dismissed me, and I was just like, I don't like this doctor, but everybody says he's so good. I just can't. It's like, man, yeah, I definitely got to start paying more attention now and seeing what's really happening.
Like, so going to like what you're talking about there is they're just, throwing medications at you to deal with the symptoms, which we know that happens frequently. But at what point is enough enough? Like, at what point? And I mean, I guess the threshold is going to be different for each individual person, based on their lifestyle and their interest and their goals. But like, at what point, you know, what does it take to motivate us to make the changes necessary? Like, we've seen our family members sick. For Jessica and Monique, we started off by just kind of making a list of the things that ails our family or us personally. And we noticed that we pretty much have identical lists. It's lots of diabetes, lots of heart disease, lots of high blood pressure. And we know how much this affects our community. At what point is enough enough? Like, at what point, what's it going to take for us to see a change, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, first you gotta not put your health in the hands of other people. I know people go to school to be a doctor and a nurse and things of that nature, but our medical system is not designed for us. So a lot of things that are taught to us as Black people of not being healthy is actually not true. A lot of the statistics that are given to us are not true because they don't even test enough of us to get accurate information. That's why you'll see medications that Black people will be on and they'll get sick because a lot of the medications are created based on what white people need. They're actually sicker than and have different ailments than we do. They've just conditioned us to think that we have these issues and we don't. So with that being said, yes, you should go to the doctor if you're not feeling well, but you can't rely on the doctor to tell you exactly what's wrong with you if you can't give them a baseline. What I mean by that is, I'm sorry, y'all, allergies are acting up, but we're taught your blood pressure normal range is 120/80. That's not always true for Black people. Your blood pressure might be 95/62, and that's your normal. There's another person, their blood pressure could be 132/90, and that's their normal. If you don't know your normal and you don't check it, which in 2021, you can buy those machines at the store. If you go to the doctor, they're going to treat you based on book information. It's very rare that you will find someone in the medical field that critically thinks. It is very rare you will find someone in the medical field that's a healer. So I tell people that all the time. Just because somebody passed school doesn't mean that they're knowledgeable or a healer. So they would treat you like a book instead of a person. So it's best for you to always take your own blood pressure, what it is before you get out of bed, what is it after you go to work, what is it like when you're stressed, because a lot of Black people are stressed, whether directly or indirectly. So all of these things change your DNA makeup. It changes how your organs interact. And it may not look like white people's numbers. So you always have to keep in mind, you are your advocate. Even though I was in the medical field, I live with fibromyalgia, I still have to be my own advocate. I've had to correct doctors who have given me wrong information because I never go in the room and say, I have a degree in nursing. I'm waiting to see what they're going to say. So as Black people, we have to get out of the habit of, oh, diabetes, running our culture, high blood pressure, we should be on this diet, yada, yada, yada. Unless you have lab works and facts that that's something that happens in your family, overall, it's not really a general Black thing. So if you want to take control of your health, you got to first understand your body, how it works, and how your personal body is affected by certain things, and not as a general collective. And a lot of people don't. They just show up to the doctor, say something's wrong, but they really don't know like what's going on with their body, what's affecting it. They're just waiting for the doctor to give an answer. They're not always on your side. That's just my opinion.
So other
Gotcha.
than checking blood pressure, like ask somebody who, like you said, you are well versed, your degree is in that area. What do you suggest that we do as individuals to make sure that we maintain a thumb and know where we stand with our health? So whenever we do have situations, we know what to advocate for.
It takes a while. So I always encourage the people I work with to keep a quote unquote medical book. That can be a regular notebook that you have. But if you have insurance, there's no reason that you should not be having annual exams. So you need to be making sure that you have all your lab work done, your blood pressure, your BMI. I mean, everything from top to bottom. You keep a record of it. Then on your own, if the doctor declares you healthy, on your own, if you want to, every once in a while, you check your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing. Then you have to get even further with what is your job? Does your job stress you out? What is your blood pressure after you work? How do you feel after you eat certain foods? Those are things that you need to recognize. A lot of us are not connected to our bodies, so we kind of ignore those things. So the first step is just get your annual exam, do all the lab work, keep it. As you look at it, you'll begin to see over 3, 4, 5 years, like, oh, this is just my normal blood pressure. Or, oh, I realize when I go to work or do overtime, or if I'm in a certain area with certain people, it goes up. Or if I do this, it goes down. That gives you a baseline. That way, if you go and then keep the same doctor, because what I see some people do, now don't stay with a doctor and you're not comfortable. But what I see a lot of people do is they'll go to this doctor, then they might not go to the doctor for a while. Then they'll choose another doctor, and that doctor's like, okay, I'm starting from the beginning. But you don't have a record to give him. You don't have records from the other doctor to transfer to him or a notebook. So if you do those things, that in itself kind of lets you know, okay, this is my body. This is how it reacts to internal or external stressors. And then that way you'll kind of be like, okay, now I know what I need to avoid or add or etc. I hope
So
that
what
answers your question.
specific I told you I had lots of questions for you. Because so like whenever I go for like my annual like PAP and stuff like that, because cervical cancer does run in my family, I do have them run that cancer screen. But if anytime that I have changed doctors, basically I have to advocate and argue with them because to show them that my insurance needs to take care of this. So I feel like doctors are reluctant to run tests. Are there specific ones that we need to ask for? And what happens if they, I guess, say that we don't need that?
I don't necessarily say they're reluctant. Again, they go by books.
Mhm.
So a lot of times it's not that the doctor doesn't want to. A lot of times, depending on if they're a private practice or they're with a corporation, a lot of people can't afford it because the insurances have stipulation. So that's another political thing. Insurance companies might say, I don't care who the heck you are. For instance, breast. I just got my mammogram. If you're not 40 and above, they're not paying. So sometimes it's not that the doctors are not reluctant. It's like, well, in our office, or if I have to send you over to the hospital, that might be $2,000. Can you afford it?
Gotcha. Okay.
So unless you can show, because a pap smear pretty much tests everything, and insurances cover that. Most insurances, that's a requirement. You have a baseline, because I work for them. You have a baseline of what a package is. You always get a pap smear. So to me, if your pap smears have been coming out normal, even though that's a history in your family, you might can bring it up to your doctor, but just make sure you're getting it every year. And then monitoring things like, you're making sure that your vaginal discharge is normal, monitoring to see if it's different. Have you been itching more? Have you, all those different things, a foul odor. You can also, excuse me, you can ask for the STI screenings, because a lot of times when people, not saying this is your family, but a lot of times when they have like cervical cancer or vaginal cancer, it comes from HPV, which is a papillomavirus. It causes the warts, which a lot of those strands are cancer. So in addition to your pap smear, because all the time the doctors won't test for that. So in addition to your pap smear, tell them that you want the full panel, including the HIV, including the HPV, because sometimes they skip some of the tests. This is just what it is.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm good on that, doctor. They run full panels of everything whenever I go in there. I'm just asking more so for like a general practitioner, because they don't do things like, I mean, they check your blood pressure, but they're not, screening your blood for anything else. I didn't know if there was anything else I need to specifically ask my
But
GP.
see, even regardless if you're a specialist, sometimes you have to ask them too.
Okay.
Because if they declare you healthy, they just are like, why would I do extra tests? If that makes sense. So when you go to your general doctor or your OBGYN, they'll do a full CBC panel, which is your red blood cells, your potassium, your calcium. And even with those, depending on the lab that they go to, the lab have their own little scales. And that's why I said you need to keep those and have them on file. Because it's been times with me, okay, for instance, me and a lot of people deal with vitamin D, right? And I know it's always low. My vitamin D might be normal, but when I see my calcium is high, I already know my body. The only reason why my vitamin D is normal is because my calcium is high as shit. And so you're like, stay away from dairy. And I'm like, no, I need you to prescribe me the high dose of vitamin D, because our bodies heal us and they work for us when we don't know. So if you're low on vitamin D, your body is going to hold on to calcium. If your vitamin D is too high, it's going to let calcium go. I know that about me. So when I look at my labs and the doctors are like, you cool. No, I'm not. Because the last time I was in here, my calcium was low. I'm in here 30 days later and it's high. You keep saying the vitamin D levels are normal. They're not normal. My body is doing what it's supposed to do, but it's going to eventually get tired and it's going to bottom out. So those are things that normal people don't know, but you have to keep up with those records. Even if you never had a medical degree, if you keep those labs and you look at them and you compare them every time you go, you'll even be able to read it even if you don't have that degree.
Okay. thought somebody else was about to say something too. Y'all unmuted. Well, I guess this goes back. So we started off by making a list of the things that affect our families. How do you know these things? And I guess this kind of goes back into talking. So I have like a strand of questions for my number 2. It says, do you know your family medical history? Is health a normalized topic in your home/family? Has it always been? Is there shame tied to it? And how is your family combating this, or do you need help in initiating these conversations?
That was for me.
That was for everybody. Just kind of
Oh.
like, what does it look like in your family? Like, because I feel like I find out about health conditions once somebody gets hospitalized, like in my family. It's not anything that we just talk about. We find out that such and such got put in the hospital. Oh, what's wrong? Oh, diabetes, or oh, he had high blood pressure and his levels were high, indicating possible heart attack. But we don't find out about that until after. So what does that look like in y'all's families? Like, is it openly discussed, or is it kind of kept hush hush until something big happens?
Well, for me, I kind of know because I'm nerdy and I'm very observant. So I pay attention to when people have things, or I know their lifestyle. So if they ever get sick and go in the hospital, it's like, oh, that was their lifestyle. But I pretty much, being around my grandmother and like my mom and the rest of my family, I do know their history. I know that they go to the doctor and they may or may not stay consistent with what is recommended, but I do know that they're aware of their health and they've always taken care of it. The issue with us and our experience has not necessarily been that you did not take care of it, but for the time frames, like, so if I go back to the 80s till now, because the doctors that they had access to in earlier years may not have beneficial. It's several people in my family that their health wouldn't be as bad as it is now, but the doctors that they were going to initially in the 80s and 90s did not treat them correctly and gave them the wrong treatment, and it made them sicker. So that's have been the experience for us. But like my generation and maybe my mom, because you can get better access to care, you're going outside of Griffin to get care. Our treatment has been phenomenal compared to like the older generation.
Anybody else?
Well, mine are, I guess, yeah, it's kind of like, surprise, this is my issue. Um, and that's pretty sad because, like, I didn't find out until recently that my dad had hypertension and diabetes. Like, I didn't know. Um, I know about my grandma for years, but yeah, he just doesn't talk about whatever is going on with him. So a lot of these situations that come about is definitely after the fact. Um, Basically trying to keep it a secret and no one really realizing, especially with the cancer situation, until it's so far advanced and they're going to transition relatively soon. So yeah, it's not something that we openly discuss.
And I would say for me, it's a combination. So my mother was a nurse. So, we used to have a lot of conversations about health and, a lot of hospital talk and what's going on and different diseases and different things like that. So in one sense, I had a lot of information, but then another sense on a wider family level, it was more like it was when someone got sick or died and then you found out what they had. And I also said with my mother, one thing that really surprised me with her is that even though I knew she had diabetes and high blood pressure, those things, she did not tell me about the kidney disease and the effects on her kidneys until she wound up on dialysis. And I remember being angry about that because it's like, well, we could have done something. I would have helped you make some changes, all these different things. And she was a nurse, like I said, but she actually did not tell me about it until, they were calling me saying she's in the hospital. She's about to have to start dialysis.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with my dad. I didn't have, I was very ignorant to, I guess, the depth of diabetes. I knew that people in my family had it, but I was naive and I just associated with, oh, just regulate your sugar, you'll be fine. And I didn't realize, I guess, the toll that it really does take on somebody. So whenever he started having severe issues, like I went through that bout of anger as well, because I wasn't going to his doctor's appointments and he wasn't sharing these things. And so just kind of being ignorant to it. We weren't enforcing anything. We would try to get him to take his medications and remind him, don't do this and don't do that. But I think ignorance stopped us from pushing for things that could have prevented a lot of the stuff he's going through now.
Well, I think with even diabetes, it's even how we talk about the disease, and we downplay it and we say, I have a touch of sugar. I got a little sugar or something like that, almost. And you don't realize that it is a systemic disease and it affects every organ, and it is really, it takes such a hard toll on your body. But yet when we talk about it, we talk about it and we couch it in these terms that really are not true. We don't talk about it to the effect that it really has on your body.
I mean, you also have to be compassionate for people. I don't necessarily think that a lot of times they're ignorant, because I'm on the other side with the medical field. Doctors talk in doctor terms. I have been in rooms with patients and the doctors just say something and they'll shake their head and go, and I'll intentionally stay and let them leave. And I'll say, did you understand what he said? And they'll say yes. And then I'll tell them to explain it to me. And then when they try to explain it to me, I'm like, that's not even what it means. And I was always this nurse to break it down and even explain what is happening inside the body. And every time the patient will go, what? Nobody never told me that. I didn't understand. I didn't know that. I didn't know that would kill me. So it's a lot of times not necessarily that they're ignorant. They really honestly don't know. And then when you think about our people in the Black community, a lot of times you have two things that go into play. One, people keep it to themselves because they don't want nobody else worrying. It's kind of like that thing about what stays in this house should stay in this house and don't tell anybody. That kind of mindset. You also have religion that plays a factor. A lot of people in our community is very Christian based, and it goes into don't tell anybody anything. I will see 25 people calling reverence and praying, but they don't know that they also need to implement what the doctor is telling them to do, or to change their diet, or these different things. So, some of it's cultural. Some of it you just have to extend grace because they just don't know. And some of it is that just people need to start being open and really talking and not holding things to themselves, in the name of I'm protecting my family. I don't want anybody worrying about me. I don't want people to know that I'm dying, because I've had patients that they knew they were dying. Family come in happy and they be praying. And you can't say nothing as a nurse, but you're like, you're gonna ever tell them? No, because I just don't want them to worry. And that's a big thing that happens in our culture and with our people. And I think that's just a way of coping. It stems back from hundreds of years. It's just a coping mechanism.
I mean, I think that's 100% true, though. I think that, like you said, because they're advocating for more social support in working with patients, that's why I've mandated that you have social workers in dialysis centers, is to be a patient advocate. And a lot of what you said is just true. A lot of times patients will sit there and nod their heads and have absolutely no idea what that doctor just said. And I can sit there and I can read the signs and I just pick up on things with people. And I'm like, do you understand what the doctor is saying? And, I said, well, let's get the doctor back over here. Let's get the nurse over here and get that support you need. Let's get someone in the home with you. Because a lot of times, even from just a point of just like understanding accents, sometimes we have Indian doctors. Sometimes those accents are different. They're thick. And they literally don't understand what the doctor is saying, but they won't say that, you know? And so I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of things that go on in healthcare. And I agree with what you said before about being your own. I always tell my patients, you have to be your own best advocate, because we give over so much control to doctors. And I have literally seen them they're human and they make a lot of mistakes. You know, I've literally seen them documented in the wrong patient's record. You know, I'm like, no, doctor, you didn't just see that patient, you saw another patient. You know, oh, okay, you know, and they close out their record. But I'm like, you know, had I not been there, standing there and saw that, you know, that they would have never caught that mistake. But they're humans and they make mistakes. You know, they don't always catch things. And I tell my patients a lot of the same things. Keep your records, write down your questions, take someone with you. And it's all about, like you said, learning how to be an advocate and learn what's going on with your body specifically, which I think across the board, I see it with our community especially, but it's kind of across the board too. It is socioeconomic factors in there as well. And we just hand over so much. We think the doctor said, and we just hand over all this control when really we need to be taking control of our own health and lives.
Yeah, because a lot of time, you know, I tell people, and it makes them, I said, no, don't make this fearful for you to go to the doctor. It's not about being fear. I'm just telling you so you can know how important it is for you to care for yourself. You know, when society changed and people needed money, you know, going back to me saying it's the difference between a healer and someone who has book sense. There are plenty of people that I worked with and they pass school, but they don't really care about people. I'll just say it like that. And they don't have a desire to explain anything. And when you go to school for so long, you know, if I get in a room with them, they start talking, I understand what they're saying. But the average person, you know, it's hard. Say, for instance, you got a master's degree and then you're trying to teach a 1-year-old something. You know, the baby don't know what you're talking about. Or you're trying to teach a 4-year-old. You know, if you've ever been a teacher, the first thing they'll say is if you can't teach anybody like on a second grade, you know, level or fourth grade level, are they really learning? That's not to say adults are dumb, but you have to bring clarity to things. That's why, you know, it's sort, you know, back in the day, I remember, like even with my grandmother, you can go to the doctor without bringing all your medications. Now the doctors are just like, what medicines you take? And if you have somebody that's taking 8 medications and they're like, what dosage and how much? Before you can finish, they've moved on to something else. And so a lot of times our medicines are making us sick. People need to be able to say, you know, you prescribed me this medicine. I tried it. I took it for 2 weeks, but I noticed X, Y, and Z. Even if their books say that's not normal. I use me for an example. I'm always my advocate. They'll put me on medications. Me being a nurse, if you open up the medical book, they'll say less than 0.5% of the population gets this. Guess who gets it? Me. I have even been accused of, you just want another medication. No, I know me. If I have to sue you, I know me. I have even got genetic testing to prove that it wasn't a lie. So it's important. It's very important for you to be your own advocate. It's very important to not hop on different diets and take different herbs and stuff people suggest. You know, like one of the big things in our community is Dr. Sebi. All of his stuff doesn't work. I was with Dr. Sebi like 20 years ago when nobody knew who he was, and he had an office in Atlanta. And I remember his family going, they did what doctors did. You did a whole panel, you did a whole assessment when you came in. And the biggest hang up his daughter had was, she was like, you're regular, which she meant bowel movements. I was like, yeah. You go every time you eat? Yeah. She treated me like the doctors treat most patients. She was like, that's abnormal, because if you're eating meat, X, Y, and Z, that's impossible. And I was like, no, it's true. And some of their stuff made me sick, and it's because I didn't need it. But if one person says, oh, this is healthy, or you need to be vegan, we ain't even gonna go into the vegan diet being bad, but you need to be vegan, or you need to be vegetarian, or you need to cut this meat. If it hasn't really made you sick, or you haven't had any complications with it, it's hard to try to convince other people to do that. Like, you need to know proof of your own body. it's great to be it's great to be your own advocate against doctors. But before you can be an advocate against the doctors, you need to be an advocate against yourself. Be able to explain yourself clearly, be able to stand up for yourself like you're in court, be able to know how your body reacts to things. Is this really harmful? Do I even really need to change it? Has this really affected anybody else? Why am I doing this because somebody else suggested it? Like, those are questions, self-awareness questions you have to keep asking yourself when it comes to your health every day. Who's giving it to me? Is this based on Black people alone? Or is this based over the world as a collective? How many people did they test? Those are things regular people can look up. You can Google. Okay, you said this diet is the best. How many people did they study on it? Was it 70% white people and they studied 150 white people, but when it came to Black people, they only studied 500 in some rural area where these people never go to the doctor, they don't have adequate health care, and their whole family has always been sick, and now they're saying all Black people are going to have this. Because that's what happens. That truly is what happens most of the
Where
time.
do you find that? Like, what, I guess, because I mean, I get what you're saying, and like I'm learning. But I think that, because like, for instance, one of the things I've been researching right now is that COVID shot and the efficacy of it and the effects of it. And because I know that genetically, people are different, it's going to affect different people in different ways. I've just kind of been looking to see what comes out about it. And I would like to see something that is broken down by race, but whenever I look for it, I'm not seeing it. So I guess, how do we go about finding that kind of stuff? Or is it just because
I'm
that's
going to
too
be
early, that's why
honest,
I
you're
can't find
not
it?
going to find that information on COVID.
Okay.
You're just not going to find it. We're in testing. They don't want to say that, but we're in testing. You probably won't find the information for 10 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
10, 15 years. It's not out there. It usually takes them 10, 15 years to even get that. Right now, I'm still trying to figure out when are you going to take antibodies for the people who took the injection. Like, people are getting the injections and now they're like, I don't need a mask. First of all, who said you formed antibodies? When did they take the test after to see if you do have antibodies? How do they know it covers the next strand? Or is this like a flu shot where it's not an antibody and it's just a shot that will lessen the symptoms because your body recognized it? That won't be out for like 10, 15, maybe 20 years.
Gotcha.
Well, at least they did say that when you get the vaccine, they said that it'll lessen the chance of you dying, being hospitalized. So that's about as far as they got.
And pretty much that's what the flu shot does. So when I hear people say,
Exactly.
I got the flu shot and I still got the flu, you probably was already had the flu or you was a carrier when you got the shot, kind of stimulated your immune system and then you caught it. It doesn't stop it. It just lessens the symptoms. So yeah, you're not going to pretty much find anything for COVID besides you need to take it so we can get back to normal. What I would look for, even though you can't find things based on race, is research who has had side effects and where. Because they're going to always tell you it's short. I don't care if it's only a small population. You want to see what happened to people, how did it affect them, because people are going to share their stories, if they're allowing them. How long did it last? So they can kind of give you an idea of what could be the worst if by chance you took it. Again, not to be fearful, because if you want to take it, you can take it. But at least that'll kind of show you, well, I know somebody who got it, they only had soreness like regular vaccine. But I saw some people who got it and maybe it caused something else. That's pretty much all we have right now when it comes to COVID.
Well, that explains why I'm not having any luck finding what I'm looking for. Because that's what I'm finding is kind of what you have, is just personal accounts of this is what happened to me in particular. And, a lot of my friends who are in the healthcare field or friends with parents who are elderly and stuff like that have been posting, their personal experiences, but I haven't been able to find anything that's like, this percentage of people are having this or anything like that. Because that's what I've been looking for.
The only thing I could compare it to is, and again, that's just you just looking, but H1N1. the virus I caught. It's kind of like in that family of COVID
Mhm.
or the bird flu, because they do have about 10 years plus information on that. Maybe you can look at that. Again, it won't give you direct information about COVID, but since there are similar families, you can kind of see what happened with that information and kind of give you a better understanding of what could potentially happen with the COVID vaccine.
Okay. I appreciate that. Other than that, I think because those were pretty much my questions. My questions were basically, what's it going to take for us to make changes about, knowing our medical history. We've hit on food deserts and access and affordability already. And then I guess, is there anything that we haven't covered that you are hoping to get from this book or from these discussions? Because that was my last question, is what are you hoping to learn, like specifically from this book? But I think we might have covered most of that too, but is there anything else?
Not what I was hoping. One thing I was surprised about, did he say, I think it was in chapter 1 or 2, that the doctors don't have to have continuing education hours for their license?
Some of them
No.
don't.
Yeah, that's what he was saying, is that most of their ongoing information comes from pharmaceutical reps. And I thought that was crazy. Just as an LCSW, we have to have ongoing education hours. And I'm like, why is it that an MD wouldn't have to have that same standard? I just thought that was interesting.
Well,
Right, because I got to have 10 a year.
Yeah, but I mean, like Georgia, for instance, right? People just don't know any, don't have information. But Georgia, for instance, what was that? 2015 or 14? Nurses, they're required in Georgia either. Now I had licenses in other states, and like Florida, I was like, shit, how many classes do I have to take? I was taking continuing education forever. Georgia, you didn't need nothing.
Not surprised.
And a lot of times with what I tell people, you might go to the doctor. The nurse is the backbone of the doctor. A lot of times he doesn't have a clue. Like if you're in the hospital, they do not have a clue what's going on with you, because the nurses do the bulk of the assessments, what to look for and what to expect. My biggest pet peeve when I was in the medical field wasn't my patients, it was my coworkers. I was always deemed, wasn't nothing wrong with me until you became my nurse. Something been wrong with you. The nurse before just didn't see it. And she didn't notify the doctor. He was waiting on her. If it was a girl, a woman doctor, well, they were waiting on her to say something. She said everything was okay and they looked okay. And that was because they did not have to research more. And that's dangerous, because what you learned last year might not be the same for this year. Or the standards might have changed, or they found that something was more safe to do. That was a big issue I had when they were like, can nurses come out of retirement and help with COVID? Huh? You're gonna ask somebody that ain't been in the medical field for 20 years to help with COVID? I'm not saying she can't. If like people were dying and it was war, she can do the basics, but like, she hasn't even been working. So does she even know the standard protocols for protection? Or is she going to walk in there doing the same protection that she did like 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah,
And
my
that is
line sister, they pull her in like that. She was like, because she did her undergrad in nursing. She was a nurse for a couple of years, and then she went back for like a nursing technology master's. And so she's been doing like medical equipment stuff for the past 7 or 8 years. But she's like, they literally pulled me off the floor from like teaching doctors how to use these new machines and stuff like that to administer COVID shots. And she was talking about how nervous she was her first couple of days back. She was like, I ain't had to stick nobody in 5 years. And suddenly give me a vaccine shot to take and give
pretty
people.
much. And think about, she just doing vaccines. Imagine the amount of people they called in to actually treat a patient bedside.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccine, you're nervous, but you pretty much know, okay, I put it in the big muscle in the butt or in, shoulder or whatever. But when you tell somebody, okay, you haven't did it in 15 years, I want you to be on the bedside and monitor the machines. They were switching out machines, 10, 7 years ago. And I said, like, they're constantly updating stuff. then that becomes a safety hazard, not just for patients and not getting the appropriate care, but for the public in general. Because once we treat a patient, you go out into the world. And so those are things that we really have to consider. You have people in the medical field and they feel like, well, whatever I've been doing for the last 15 years, why do I need to learn something new? Because you have people in the background like scientists and some people, nurses invest in that. I remember I was going to do it once. They work with like the CDC and different people, and they find out, okay, what we were doing wasn't helping. We found a better way to even be more protective of the patients. And then you have someone to say, I don't need to learn those new techniques, but we took an oath to first do no harm. And well, to me, I feel like that's harmful. So when you explain that, that's even more reason why people need to know. You need to be your own advocate. If a nurse walk in, I would tell my own patients, tell me if I walk in and it makes you more comfortable that you need to visibly see me wash my hands, even though I know I washed them, guess what I'm doing? I'm washing them in front of you. If you say, I don't want you to, did you wear gloves? Do you have on your mask? These are things that you have to protect yourself, because sometimes, like Sandra was saying, people are human. You get busy and you think little things don't matter. Everything matters when it comes to you, your health, and your body. Even to the way people talk to you. You don't like how the doctor's talking to you. There's your mental health. You have to demand respect when it comes to your total care.
Yeah, when I went to my visit last week or so, the lady came in. She was like, "Okay, I want to take your blood pressure." And I was like, "Wait, when's the last time they sanitized that?" She said, "You know what? I'm gonna do it right in front of you." And she was watching her, and then she went ahead and washed her. She washed her hands first, and then she sanitized. She said, I'm gonna put it here." Like, I'm trying to make me comfortable. I said, "Yeah, we're good. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She was like, "Never apologize for your safety, for your health. Like, stop apologizing. This is for you." And I was like, I feel bad I'm making you do all this, but I freak out if I don't see it. And she's like, "You don't have to apologize." So yeah. And she's the only person who's ever done that. Everybody else is just like, you go with it.
Yeah. Well, ladies, I appreciate it. Monique, I appreciate you answering all my questions. I'm sure there will be more as we continue through this book. So
You're welcome.
Well, like in the book, he said that he waited 6 months when he had that red rash to finally go see his dermatologist friend. Was that from air or busyness?
Wait a minute. I didn't, you kind of went out. Say that again.
Sorry, I was like really quickly. So in the book, he said when he got that red rash all over him, and he just started just covering up, and he waited 6 months before he went to go see his dermatologist friend about it. Was that from arrogance or busyness? Because that's crazy as a doctor that you wouldn't try to.
No. So for instance, I wouldn't do that to my daughter. But what happens a lot of times if you're in the medical field, a lot of us self-assess ourselves, and then we kind of second nature treat it on our own, because we don't want you don't want to deal with the people that you work with, because when you go, you're like, okay, let me treat this first without having to just go, and it's not necessary. Because a lot of times what happens, even if you do have a medical degree or nursing, you go and then they'll give you something that you don't need, or it's not going to work. And that frustrates a lot of people in the medical field. I've did it plenty of times. Say for instance, if I have bad allergies, if I sense my ears tingling, I'll go and be like, "Can you give me antibiotics?" Because literally in 24 hours, I'll go from being okay with a little ring in my ears to I have a fever 103, and constantly having to go only for them to say, "We don't give antibiotics anymore because you don't have no ear infection," to return less than 24 hours and they go, "Oh my God," and they give it. It's frustration. So it's not that he is arrogant. That happens a lot in the medical field. We rather treat ourselves first, and then what we do doesn't work and we know the limits, then we'll go see a doctor.
Gotcha. I just thought 6 months was excessive to be hiding behind gloves and long sleeves and then trying to explain to your patients what it is and it's not contagious.
Now, don't get me wrong, 6 months is excessive. I'm not waiting 6 months. But I literally know doctors who will be like, okay, like that again, I wouldn't have did it because he works in a clinical setting and he's with patients. I wouldn't make my patients have to question if I'm not sick or not. But a lot of times doctors, because we do have connections, we'll be like, can you run a test or something? Can you swab this? Oh, I'm cool. Okay, well, let me go do X, Y, and Z and see if that works. And then if it doesn't, then I'll treat it. Yeah, I do think 6 months is extreme.
Thank you. That was it for me.
All right. Well, Shonda, I am done. You close us out.
Ooh, I appreciate it. I really needed the time to just listen and not give too much brain power to this today. Because I told you I am wore out. So thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate you stepping in to facilitate. So for our next discussion, do we have any volunteers in the room with us right now? Don't all volunteer at once.
Sandra said she wanted to do next week. Then it was
Jessica, you lying.
I know DeAndre put in the comments he would do it too. He just wasn't starting, so we can stick it on him if we need to.
But it wasn't that his choice of a book too.
Right, it was his choice.
Like, wait a
Why
minute.
ain't you volunteering? Sandra said, you lying?
I mean, the chapters are short. I mean, I don't mind doing it if he doesn't do it this time. I mean, I say stick it with DeAndre, but if not, I don't mind doing it.
Okay, cool. I'll reach out to him again and put you down as backup just in case I forget.
Yeah, because the chapters are really short and not very long.
I think this is one of those books, no matter if we're left with just a little bit for the chapters, that it's still going to be like real thorough, in-depth discussion because of so many different experiences related to our health. So I'm glad that that's the case. Well, all right, ladies, have a good week, and I look forward to seeing y'all again on Sunday.
Okay.
And I promise I'll be trying to get here on time. These people be talking on Clubhouse. I'm trying to get here.
Girl, I wouldn't even know. I ain't been on Clubhouse yet because I'm a forever Android user. So
Really, it was cool, but they was like, "Can you moderate? Can you be in the conversation?" And I'd be like, "Can y'all hurry up, please?" So I'm gonna try to get here on time.
tell them you got to get your real family. We don't know them Clubhouse folks.
I know they be asking questions, and I'd be like, "What? Say what?" Girl, it's interesting. I wish you had an iPhone because you'd be like, "What?"
Oh man. Well, yeah, I still appreciate you, especially today with so many questions that we had, and I knew you would know.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I'm a nerd, so I love these topics.
All right, y'all. Have a good week, everyone. See y'all next Sunday.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.